He spat on his wife at dinner, not knowing she secretly owned 90% of everything he had. The sound of silverware scraping against plates filled the room, but no one was really eating anymore. You could have cut the tension with the butter knife still resting beside Rachel Monroe's untouched mashed potatoes. Her husband, Jordan Whitaker, sat across from her, face red, hands trembling, words slurring slightly from the 2 glasses of bourbon he swore would help him relax before dinner. It was supposed to be a peaceful family gathering, a simple meal at his parents' home in Nashville, Tennessee, filled with laughter, stories, and maybe a few jokes that went too far. But what happened that night would be remembered by everyone sitting at that table for all the wrong reasons. Jordan leaned back in his chair, smirking as his father, Howard Whitaker, bragged about the family legacy. He went on and on about how proud he was of their company, Whitaker Technologies, claiming it was built from generations of hard work. Rachel stayed quiet, hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes calm but sharp. She'd learned long ago that in this house, silence was safer than honesty, especially when the family's ego filled the air thicker than the smell of roasted turkey. "See, Rachel," Howard said, raising his glass toward her, "it's not easy keeping a company alive these days. Takes guts. Takes men who know what they're doing." There it was, the little jab hiding behind a smile, the one she'd heard 100 times before. She smiled back politely. "You're right, Mr. Whitaker. It does take guts. And strategy." Before she could finish, Jordan interrupted with a mocking laugh. "Strategy? Babe, don't act like you know how to run a company. You handle the office decor, not the numbers." The table chuckled, except for Rachel. Her eyes flickered just for a second, but she stayed composed. Inside, though, something began to burn. She'd been the one staying up till 3 a.m. balancing those numbers. She'd been the one negotiating contracts, saving the company from bankruptcy when Jordan's impulsive deals nearly sank it 3 years ago. But he didn't know that, or maybe he just couldn't admit it. His mother, Linda Whitaker, gave a small, satisfied grin and placed her manicured hand over Jordan's. "He's right, dear. You've done wonderfully as a wife. Supporting your husband, that's no small thing." Rachel's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to smile again. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker." The conversation rolled on, but the air had shifted. You could feel it, like everyone knew a storm was coming but pretended not to see the clouds forming right above them. Jordan kept drinking. The more he drank, the looser his tongue became. He started talking about how some people get lucky, and how certain folks wouldn't have half what they do without his family's name attached. Every word was a needle. Rachel had always been patient, always calm. But when Jordan brought up her background, how she should be grateful to have been brought into this world of opportunity, the needles turned to knives. Her voice stayed level. "You mean the world I helped build?" The laughter died instantly. His father's fork clinked against his plate. Linda's smile faded. Jordan blinked, clearly caught off guard. "What's that supposed to mean?" he said, his tone sharp, challenging. Rachel leaned forward slightly. "I'm just saying, Jordan, maybe you shouldn't forget who kept things running when everything almost collapsed." He stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, a sneer crept across his face. "You think you did that? You?" He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The room went silent. He pointed his finger at her, shaking his head. "You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for me. Don't you dare act like you made this family what it is." Rachel didn't flinch. "You're right. I didn't make this family, but I did save your company." His lips twitched. He stepped closer. Everyone froze. And then it happened. So fast, no one could stop it. Jordan spat right in her face. Linda gasped. Howard dropped his fork. The only sound left was the echo of Rachel's slow, steady breath. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just sat there, wiping her face with her napkin, calm, controlled. The kind of calm that makes everyone else in the room suddenly realize how wrong they are. She looked him dead in the eyes. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." But no one at that table knew just how right she was. At least, not yet. But before we get to that moment of reckoning, let's go back. Back to the days before that dinner, when the cracks in their marriage started showing in small, quiet ways that no one wanted to admit. 3 days before that disastrous dinner, the Whitaker house in Franklin, Tennessee, looked picture-perfect from the outside. A white porch wrapped around the front, flowers trimmed just right, and a black Mercedes gleaming in the driveway. But inside that house, things were breaking in ways no one could see. Rachel sat in her home office, laptop open, glasses sliding down her nose. She was reviewing the latest quarterly numbers for Whitaker Technologies, numbers that looked good. Too good, considering the chaos she'd cleaned up behind the scenes. Jordan had taken a massive risk months earlier, investing in a side project that nearly bled the company dry. But Rachel had quietly pulled it back from the edge, rerouted funds, called in favors, and closed 2 major contracts without taking credit. Her phone buzzed. Jordan again. "Hey, babe," his voice drawled through the speaker. "You ready for dinner with my parents this weekend?" "I'll be ready," she said softly, eyes still on her screen. "You sure about this, though?" "Your mom didn't seem too thrilled last time," he chuckled. "She's just old-fashioned. She'll come around. Besides, you've been doing great at work. This is a good time to show them everything's fine." Rachel looked up from the laptop. "Everything's fine," she repeated. "Jordan, we haven't been fine in months." There was silence on the line, then a scoff. "You're being dramatic. We're fine. You're just stressed." She took a slow breath. "I'm not stressed." "I'm tired, Jordan. I'm tired of pretending like we're equals when you treat me like I'm just your assistant." He didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his tone was flat. "You're my wife, Rachel. Don't make this about ego." She almost laughed. "My ego? You mean the one I used to fix your business problems?" He hung up. That was how most of their arguments ended lately, with silence. The kind of silence that seeps into everything, turning the air heavy. Later that night, Rachel sat on the back porch, listening to the distant sounds of cars on the highway. She thought about how things used to be, back when Jordan was still kind, back when they were just 2 dreamers, working out of a cramped apartment, sharing takeout, and planning to take over the world together. But success changed him, or maybe it revealed him. When the company started making money, Jordan became someone else, louder, prouder, and crueler. He'd interrupt her during meetings, take credit for her strategies, and remind her in subtle ways that it was his family's company. The next morning, she got a call from Thomas Reed, the company's CFO, and one of the few people who truly respected her. "Rachel, we need to talk," he said. "Jordan's been talking to investors behind your back again. He's trying to restructure the board." Her stomach tightened. "Restructure how?" "By moving your voting rights under his name." Rachel leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. "He can't do that," she said. "Not legally." "I know. But he doesn't think you'll fight back. He's assuming you'll stay quiet like always." She didn't respond for a moment. She looked out the window, watching the wind stir the trees. "Thanks, Tom. I'll handle it." She hung up, grabbed her bag, and walked straight into the office that morning. The receptionist greeted her with a nervous smile. Everyone knew Rachel was the one who actually ran things, but Jordan liked to act like she was helping out. He'd even changed her title on the website from CEO to operations consultant, saying it sounded friendlier. As she walked past his office, she heard laughter. Jordan was on speakerphone with one of his buddies. "Nah, man, she's got her name on the paperwork, but come on. You think I'd let my wife run my company? Please." Her steps slowed. Her throat felt tight, but her voice stayed calm when she said, "Good morning, Jordan." He turned, startled. "Hey, babe." "I was just talking business?" she said, eyebrows raised. He grinned, clearly embarrassed. "Yeah, just some harmless jokes." Rachel smiled faintly. "Right, harmless." She walked into her own office, closed the door, and stared at the framed certificates on her wall. Proof of her degrees, her credentials, her years of experience. She'd earned everything she had. She'd built it with her own hands. But in this marriage, she was treated like decoration. She knew then that the dinner that weekend wouldn't just be another awkward family meal. It would be a test of patience, of restraint, of self-worth. And deep down, she also knew, if things went wrong this time, she wouldn't keep pretending. But before that fateful evening, Rachel still had to walk into the lion's den, the Whitaker family home, where politeness was just another way of hiding judgment. Saturday evening came faster than Rachel expected. The November air in Franklin, Tennessee had that dry chill that seeps into your skin, the kind that makes even polite smiles feel frozen. As Jordan drove, he kept drumming his fingers against the steering wheel, nervous, impatient. He hadn't said much all day, just short comments and sighs between phone calls. Rachel stared out the passenger window, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. Her hair was neatly styled, her makeup subtle, her dress, a simple navy blue, professional yet soft. She'd chosen it carefully, hoping it would make her look approachable, as Jordan's mother once suggested. The irony wasn't lost on her. When they pulled up to the Whitaker estate, the house looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Brick exterior, long driveway lined with oak trees, a porch lit with warm yellow lights. It looked inviting, but Rachel knew better. The house had never really felt welcoming. Jordan parked and adjusted his tie. "All right," he said, glancing at her. "Let's just keep tonight light, okay? No business talk, no tension, just family." Rachel tilted her head. "No tension? You sure you can manage that?" He gave her a quick look. "Don't start, Rachel. Please. Not tonight." She didn't reply. She just took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and followed him up the walkway. Linda Whitaker opened the door before they even reached the porch. "Oh, you're here," she said, her tone flat, but pretending to be cheerful. "Jordan, sweetheart, come in. Rachel. Hi." Rachel smiled politely. "It's nice to see you, Mrs. Whitaker." Linda gave a short nod, her eyes scanning Rachel from head to toe, the way some people do when they're looking for flaws they can't quite find. Inside, the dining room was already set. The long oak table gleamed under the chandelier. The smell of garlic and butter hung in the air, and Howard was pouring himself a drink at the counter. "Jordan, my boy," he called out. "Glad you made it." "Traffic wasn't too bad?" Jordan grinned, walking over to shake his father's hand. "Not at all. Good to see you, Dad." Then Howard turned to Rachel, his expression cooling just a bit. "And Rachel, always good to have you." She smiled again. "Thank you, Mr. Whitaker." The same dance every time, greetings laced with politeness sharp enough to cut glass. They sat down for appetizers. Jordan's sister Kara joined them, loud, opinionated, always ready to poke fun at Rachel. "So," Kara said, swirling her wine, "I saw the company's new campaign." "Real nice. You had anything to do with that, Rachel?" Rachel looked up, unbothered. "Yes, actually." "My team led the rebrand," Kara smirked. "Oh, so you're still working there? I thought you might have taken a step back after, well, all that drama last quarter." The drama she was referring to was Jordan's failed product launch, the one Rachel had quietly cleaned up. Jordan cleared his throat. "Yeah, we had a hiccup, but it's all under control." Howard chimed in, his voice heavy with authority. "Son, maybe next time you should run those numbers by me before jumping in." Could have saved yourself a mess. Rachel felt her stomach tighten. She knew Howard had no idea that she was the one who'd actually fixed that mess. She took a sip of water and decided to let it go, at least for now. The conversation shifted to politics, vacations, and family gossip. Rachel smiled when appropriate, laughed when it felt necessary, and counted the minutes in her head. But as dessert was brought out, the tone began to shift. Howard started asking about profits. Kara asked about diversity initiatives. And Linda, as always, found a way to bring up Rachel's background in a way that sounded innocent, but wasn't. "So, Rachel," Linda said, cutting into her pie, "remind me again, where did you say your family's from?" Rachel put down her fork. "Atlanta." Linda nodded slowly. Right. Not too many business owners from there, are there?" Jordan shifted in his seat but didn't say a word. Rachel smiled thinly. "There are plenty, actually. You just have to look." Kara laughed lightly. "Oh, come on, Rachel. Mom didn't mean it like that." "I'm sure she didn't," Rachel said, her tone calm, but sharp enough to end the moment. The table fell quiet again. You could almost hear the sound of Linda forcing a smile. Howard cleared his throat. "Anyway, Jordan tells us you two are thinking about expanding the company next quarter. Big plans ahead, huh?" Jordan nodded, glancing at Rachel. "Yeah, I'm leading that. Got a few meetings lined up already." Rachel blinked slowly. "You're leading it?" He shot her a look. "Well, yeah. I mean, that's kind of my lane." Rachel didn't reply, but inside, something cracked again. It was small, like a thin line in glass, but she could feel it spreading. She smiled politely and turned to Linda. "Dinner's lovely, by the way." Linda brightened immediately. "Thank you, dear. I'm glad someone appreciates it." The rest of the meal went on in small talk and forced laughter. Everyone was pretending things were normal, but the energy around that table said otherwise. But tension like that doesn't just disappear, it festers. And before the night was over, every quiet insult and fake smile would come crashing down in the ugliest way possible. The main course was served: roast beef, garlic potatoes, glazed carrots, the works. On the surface, it looked like a picture-perfect family meal, but beneath the small talk and the clinking of glasses, tension was winding tighter with every passing minute. Rachel tried to focus on her plate, on cutting small pieces of beef she didn't actually want to eat. Jordan, sitting beside her, had already poured himself another drink. It was only his third, but she knew how fast that number usually climbed. Howard raised his glass. "To family," he said with a proud grin. "To hard work, to legacy, and to keeping the Whitaker name alive." Everyone raised their glasses except Rachel. She hesitated for half a second before following suit. She noticed Kara's smirk at the corner of the table. Linda leaned forward, her voice sweet but calculated. "And to Jordan, who's been working tirelessly to keep the company thriving. You've done so much for all of us." Rachel's eyes flickered toward her husband. He didn't even look in her direction. She smiled faintly. "Yes, he's done a lot." Kara jumped in. "I mean, the stress he's under, I don't know how he manages." "Right, Rachel? He's the face of the company, after all." Rachel's knife stopped mid-cut. She set it down carefully. "The face, yes," she said softly, "but faces don't always do the work." Kara's eyebrows lifted. "Meaning?" Rachel met her gaze evenly. "Meaning leadership is about more than showing up to shake hands." Howard chuckled. "Well, that's true, but you can't deny Jordan's been holding it down. I mean, he's a natural-born leader. It runs in his blood." Rachel's lips curved slightly, though not in amusement. "Blood doesn't make you a leader, Mr. Whitaker." "Decisions do," Jordan turned to her, already defensive. "Rachel, come on, don't start." She looked at him calmly. "I'm not starting anything, Jordan. Just answering a question." The air tightened. Linda shifted uncomfortably. "You know, dear," she began, "it's important to know your place in a family business. Sometimes the best thing we can do is support from the sidelines." Rachel folded her napkin neatly on her lap. "I appreciate that, Mrs. Whitaker. Though I prefer boardrooms to sidelines." Kara nearly choked on her drink. "Boardrooms? That's cute." Rachel tilted her head. "Cute?" "Yeah," Kara said, laughing lightly. "I mean, it's great that you're involved and all, but come on. This is the Whitaker family company. You're just..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Part of the support team, right?" Jordan didn't say a word. He stared at his plate, avoiding eye contact. Rachel's smile didn't waver. "That's one way to look at it." Linda reached for the gravy boat, as if trying to move past the moment. "Well, we're just grateful for your help, Rachel." It's so rare to find someone so dedicated to their husband's vision. Rachel's voice was quiet but firm. "You mean our vision?" The table fell silent again. Even Howard looked unsure of how to respond. Jordan finally spoke, his tone sharp. "Rachel, they're just being polite. Don't twist everything into some kind of fight." "I'm not fighting," she said, meeting his eyes. "I'm just clarifying." He scoffed and leaned back in his chair. "You always have to have the last word, don't you?" She didn't answer. She just looked at him, the kind of look that said she'd already seen the ending before the story even began. Howard cleared his throat again, clearly uncomfortable. "All right, let's not ruin dinner. We've had enough drama this year," but Kara wasn't done. "Speaking of drama," she said, smirking, "I heard there was some kind of shakeup at the company. Something about Jordan almost losing a major client?" Jordan stiffened. "It was handled." Rachel's voice was calm. "Yes, I handled it." Kara blinked. "Oh, you did?" Rachel nodded. "Yes, the client wanted transparency and accountability, so I gave them both. It's amazing what happens when people feel respected." Howard frowned. "Wait, you handled it?" "I thought Jordan said he closed that deal." Rachel's eyes didn't leave her plate. "He signed the contract." "I just made sure there was still a contract to sign." Jordan slammed his fork down. Rachel, that's enough. She looked up, unbothered. Enough of what? The truth. His voice rose. You're embarrassing me. Then maybe stop doing things worth being embarrassed about, she replied, steady as a heartbeat. The room went still. Kara's smirk disappeared. Linda's face turned pale. Jordan's chest heaved. He glanced at his parents, then back at Rachel. You don't know when to stop, do you? Rachel's voice dropped lower. Not when I'm being disrespected in my own home, or your family's. Howard tried to defuse it. All right, both of you. Let's not do this here. But it was too late. Jordan's pride had already taken the hit. He glared at Rachel, then took a long drink of bourbon, as if swallowing his rage would somehow make it disappear. Rachel stayed quiet. Her face was calm, her hands still, but inside she felt something click into place. A line had been crossed, but pride has a way of turning small cracks into earthquakes, and Jordan's next move would shake that table to its core. It started small, just another sarcastic comment, the kind that usually rolled off Rachel's back. But this time, something in Jordan's tone cut deeper. See, that's your problem, Rachel, he said, leaning back in his chair, his voice thick from the bourbon. You always think you're smarter than everyone else. Rachel's fork paused halfway to her mouth. No, she said quietly. I just don't like pretending. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Pretending? Pretending about what? Howard and Linda exchanged worried looks. Kara leaned forward, eager for drama. About this marriage, Rachel said evenly. About this family. About this company, Jordan's face darkened. You've lost your mind, he snapped. This family took you in. My parents treated you like one of their own. Rachel turned her gaze toward Linda and Howard. Did they? She asked, not raising her voice. Because I can't remember a single dinner where I wasn't reminded I didn't belong here. Linda gasped softly. Rachel, that's not fair. It's honest, Rachel interrupted. You don't have to like it, but it's true. Jordan slammed his hand on the table, silverware rattling. Watch your tone. Her expression didn't change. Or what, Jordan? He pointed at her. You're crossing the line. I crossed the line? She said, her tone still calm. After you sat here and let your family talk to me like I was some charity case? His face twisted. Don't turn this on me. Rachel tilted her head slightly. Why not? It's the truth. You married me because I made you look good, because you wanted to prove to your family that you could be different. But deep down, you're just like them, comfortable as long as I stay beneath you. The words hit him hard. His jaw clenched, his nostrils flared. The room felt smaller, heavier. Kara tried to laugh it off. Okay, wow, maybe we should all take a breath. Shut up, Kara, Jordan barked, startling everyone. Then he turned back to Rachel, voice rising. You think you built something? You didn't build anything. You wouldn't even have a name if it weren't for me. Rachel's tone never broke. You mean the name I kept out of bankruptcy twice? That was it. Jordan's control snapped. He pushed his chair back and stood, looming over her. Don't disrespect me in my parents' house, he growled. Rachel met his eyes without flinching. Then don't disrespect me in yours. He was breathing hard now, chest heaving, eyes wild. You think you're untouchable, huh? You think just because you have a fancy degree, you can talk down to me? I don't talk down to you, she said softly. You just don't like hearing the truth. He shook his head, muttering, unbelievable. And then, before anyone could move, before anyone even processed what was happening, he spat. It landed across her cheek, sliding down her skin in slow motion. The sound that followed wasn't a gasp. It was silence. Heavy. Electric. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. Kara froze. Even Howard, who had seen his share of ugly moments, looked horrified. Rachel didn't move at first. She just blinked once, slowly, as if her brain needed a moment to catch up to what had just happened. Then she reached for her napkin, wiped her face with quiet precision, and laid it neatly beside her plate. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked up at him with eyes so steady it made him flinch. Are you done? She asked. Jordan took a half step back, realizing too late how far he'd gone. Rachel, She stood, smoothing her dress, her movements controlled and deliberate. You're not sorry, she said. You're embarrassed. There's a difference. Rachel, please. Linda whispered, her voice trembling. Let's just calm down. Rachel turned to her. I am calm. Maybe that's what's scaring everyone. Howard tried to stand, but she raised a hand lightly. No, Mr. Whitaker. Stay seated. I'm only going to say this once. She looked around the table, at the faces that had spent years underestimating her, mocking her behind polite smiles. Then her eyes returned to her husband. You think this company, this house, this life belongs to you, she said slowly. But you don't even know what you own anymore. Jordan frowned. What are you talking about? She took a deep breath, her voice steady as stone. You want to humiliate me? Fine. But before you do, maybe you should check who's really been signing the checks. He blinked. What? Rachel's tone sharpened. You don't remember? The last time you went behind my back to restructure the board, you left your proxy signature on the transfer forms. And since you didn't read what you were signing, Howard's eyes widened. Rachel, what did you do? I didn't do anything, she said calmly. He did. He gave me 90% ownership of Whitaker Technologies. The words dropped like a stone into water. The silence that followed was thick, stunned, unreal. Jordan's face went pale. You're lying. Am I? She asked, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small envelope. She slid it across the table. Board confirmation letter. You signed it yourself. Howard opened the envelope with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the document, and then he looked up, completely speechless. Linda's voice cracked. 90%? Rachel nodded. Every dollar you make, every contract you brag about, every car in your garage, it all traces back to me. Jordan's mouth opened, but no words came out. Rachel stepped back from the table, her voice low and even. You spit on me to prove you were in control. Now you know what control really looks like. She turned and walked toward the door. No yelling, no scene, just quiet power in motion. At the door, she paused and looked over her shoulder. You wanted to make me feel small, but you just made yourself disappear. And with that, she walked out into the night, leaving the house, the company, and their broken pride behind her. But the story didn't end there, because sometimes the silence after the storm is when the real damage finally sinks in. And that was only beginning to happen for the Whitaker family. The drive back home was silent, not because Rachel didn't have words, but because she'd spent years using them. And now they no longer mattered. Some things didn't need noise. Some victories were meant to echo in silence. She parked her car in front of her house, sat there for a long moment, and finally exhaled. Her reflection stared back at her in the window, composed, steady, unshaken. She wasn't broken, not even close. She was free. Back at the Whitaker home, chaos had taken her place. Jordan sat at the head of the table, pale and speechless, staring at the contract his father still held. Linda paced near the counter, whispering to herself, and Howard just sat there, gripping the paper like it might catch fire. Kara finally broke the silence. Is that real? Howard nodded slowly. It's her signature. And yours, Jordan showed. Jordan rubbed his forehead. No. That's impossible. She can't. She wouldn't. Linda's voice shook. She did. You gave her control. You signed it. Jordan's hands trembled. She tricked me. Howard slammed his palm on the table. She didn't trick you, son. You tricked yourself. You've been walking around like you own everything, but you didn't even read your own paperwork. Kara muttered under her breath. Guess she's not just decoration after all. Linda shot her a look, but even she couldn't hide the sting of truth in that statement. Jordan stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. I'm going to fix this. I'll call the board first thing Monday. Howard leaned back, shaking his head. You can't fix arrogance with a phone call. Meanwhile, across town, Rachel was sitting in her office again. The soft light from her desk lamp fell across stacks of documents, real ones, signed and sealed, proof of everything she'd built, everything she'd earned. Her phone buzzed. It was Thomas Reed, her CFO. He didn't even wait for her to say hello. Rachel, I just got word. The Whitakers found out? Yes, she said. Tonight. He whistled softly. How'd it go? She smiled faintly. As expected. Loud, then quiet. Thomas laughed under his breath. You sure you're all right? I'm fine, she said. It's strange. I thought I'd feel angry or relieved, but I just feel done. There was a pause. Then he said, "You did what you had to do." "I did what he forced me to," she replied. "I warned him. I gave him chances. But you can't teach respect to someone who confuses power with ownership." Thomas's voice softened. "What now?" Rachel leaned back, staring out the window. "Now I run my company. My way. Without apologies." The next morning, she woke early, went for a run, and brewed her coffee. It was the first time in months she didn't feel the weight of walking on eggshells. She checked her phone. 3 missed calls from Jordan, 1 from his mother, and a string of messages, all variations of "we need to talk." She ignored them. By noon, she was in the boardroom. Her board members stood as she entered. Most had known the truth for months, but now the secrecy was over. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who no longer needed to prove herself. "As of today, there will be some leadership adjustments." The meeting lasted an hour. By the end, every decision Jordan had made without her was reversed. His name was officially removed from the leadership roster. The company's official documents now listed her, Rachel Monroe Whitaker, as sole executive owner and CEO. Afterward, Thomas approached her. "You want me to prepare a press statement?" Rachel nodded. "Keep it factual. No drama. The company deserves transparency, not gossip." He smiled. "Understood." Later that evening, she received a knock at her door. She opened it to find Jordan standing there, his once confident expression now replaced with desperation. "Rachel," he started, his voice low. "Please, can we talk?" She stepped aside. 5 minutes. He walked in slowly, glancing around at the house he hadn't seen in weeks. "I messed up," he said. "I don't even know what to say." Rachel folded her arms. "Then maybe just start with why." He swallowed hard. "I was scared, okay? You were doing better than me, and it made me feel like I was losing control. I thought if I kept you small, I'd feel big again." She looked at him, eyes soft but distant. "You didn't want a wife, Jordan. You wanted a mirror, something to reflect back what you thought you were worth." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "You're right. I don't deserve you." She sighed, stepping closer, not out of pity, but closure. "No, you don't. But I hope you learned something from this." He opened his mouth, but she stopped him. "You didn't lose me because I stopped loving you. You lost me because I started loving myself more." For a long moment, they stood there in silence. Then she walked him to the door. As he left, he turned back one last time. "Rachel, what are you going to do now?" She smiled faintly. "The same thing I've always done, build." And when the door closed behind him, it wasn't anger she felt. It was peace. The kind that only comes when you finally stop waiting for people to value what they'll never understand. But while Rachel had found her peace, the Whitaker family was still learning the hard way that the truth doesn't just change people, it exposes them. 2 days after the dinner, the Whitaker home didn't feel like a home anymore. The long dining table, once polished to perfection, still had the faint outline of spilled bourbon and untouched plates. The silence in that house had weight now, like a reminder that words, once spoken, could never be unsaid. Jordan sat on the back porch, staring into his untouched coffee. He hadn't gone into work. He couldn't. Every time he looked in the mirror, he saw a man he didn't recognize. A man who'd spat on the only person who ever believed in him. Howard joined him, lowering himself slowly into the chair beside his son. "You've made a mess, Jordan," he said quietly. Jordan didn't look up. "I know. You embarrassed yourself. You embarrassed this family. But worst of all, you disrespected the one person who kept our name alive." Jordan rubbed his forehead, shaking his head. "She's not coming back, is she?" Howard sighed. "Would you? After what you did?" There was no answer to that. Inside, Linda sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. She'd been scrolling through Rachel's name for hours, trying to find the courage to call. When she finally pressed dial, it went straight to voicemail. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Rachel, it's Linda. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I thought I was protecting my son, but really I was just feeding his pride. You didn't deserve how we treated you. None of it." She paused, exhaling shakily. "If you ever want to talk, or if there's anything I can do, well, I understand if you don't." She hung up and covered her face with her hands. For the first time, the silence felt like punishment. Kara came downstairs a few minutes later, still in pajamas. "Mom, is Dad still talking to him?" Linda nodded weakly. "Trying to knock some sense into him." Kara sat across from her, folding her arms. "You know, I used to think Rachel was just some lucky woman who married into money. Turns out she was the only real one here." Linda looked up, eyes red. She was. Meanwhile, across town, Rachel was in her new office. The space was quiet, but not empty. It was filled with purpose. A fresh start. She'd rebranded the headquarters under her name. The walls were bright, modern, simple. No family portraits, no fake awards, just work that mattered. Thomas stepped into the office, holding a few folders. "Press release went out this morning," he said. "The board's backing you fully. Investors are already responding positively." Rachel nodded. "Good." He hesitated before speaking again. "You know, the news is going to spread fast. You okay with that?" She smiled faintly. "I've spent half my life letting people tell my story for me. It's time I tell it myself." He chuckled. "You're something else, Rachel." "I have to be," she said, glancing out the window. "In this world, you either let people define you, or you define yourself." Later that day, she received a letter delivered by hand, no name on the envelope, just her address written in shaky handwriting. She opened it slowly. It was from Jordan. "Rachel, I've spent 2 days trying to figure out what to say. Every apology feels too small. I thought power made me important, but you showed me that integrity does. I didn't just lose a wife, I lost my compass. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know. I see it now. I see you, Jordan." She read the letter twice, folded it carefully, and placed it in her drawer. She didn't cry, not out of coldness, but acceptance. Sometimes closure didn't come from conversations. It came from knowing you didn't need one. That night, Rachel drove to the edge of Radnor Lake, where she used to go jogging early in the mornings. The water was still, reflecting the pink and gold of the evening sky. She stood there for a while, arms crossed against the breeze. She thought about the years she'd spent shrinking herself to make others comfortable, about the countless times she'd smiled through insults, stayed quiet during disrespect, and tried to fix people who didn't want to change. Then she thought about the dinner, the silence after he spat on her, the way she'd felt when she stood up, not weak, not humiliated, but clear. For the first time in years, she had seen herself fully. Thomas's voice from earlier echoed in her mind. You did what you had to do. And maybe that was true. Sometimes walking away wasn't about pride. It was about peace. As the sun dipped lower, Rachel whispered to herself, never again. Back at the Whitaker house, the family's conversations grew shorter with each passing day. Howard stopped mentioning the company. Linda avoided dinner altogether. Kara moved out. And Jordan, well, he sat alone most nights, staring at his phone, reading that bored confirmation letter over and over until he could no longer deny the truth. Everything he thought he controlled was gone, and the person he'd once dismissed as lucky had proven to be the real foundation all along. But the true lesson of that night wasn't just about revenge or humiliation, it was about dignity. The kind of quiet strength that doesn't need an audience to be powerful. A week later, the world had already started talking. Business outlets, podcasts, even local news stations were running the headline, Rachel Monroe Whitaker officially takes full control of Whitaker Technologies. The photos showed her standing outside the company's main building, poised, professional, eyes forward. No bitterness, no arrogance, just quiet confidence. Rachel didn't care for the noise. She didn't post statements or clap back at critics online. She didn't even mention what happened at the dinner table, because she didn't need to. The truth had already spoken for itself. That morning, she sat at a small cafe downtown, sipping her coffee, dressed casually in jeans and a soft sweater. The waiter, an older man with kind eyes, recognized her from the news. You're that lady who runs the tech company now, right? He asked. Rachel smiled. Something like that. He chuckled. You handled that whole mess with a lot of grace. Not many people could have done that. Rachel looked down for a moment, stirring her coffee. Grace doesn't mean staying silent, she said. It just means choosing your peace over someone else's chaos. The man nodded. That's wisdom right there. When he walked away, Rachel leaned back in her chair, letting the morning sunlight hit her face. For the first time in a long while, she felt light. Across town, Jordan stood outside the company's building. He didn't go in. He just stood there, watching through the glass as employees passed by, smiling, talking, working under Rachel's leadership. He'd thought about calling her again, but every time he reached for his phone, he stopped himself. Maybe the best apology wasn't another message. It was changing. Inside, Rachel was in a meeting with the marketing team. Her tone was firm but encouraging. She wasn't just running a company anymore. She was building a culture, one built on accountability, not ego. When the meeting ended, she gathered her notes and looked around the room. It was diverse, energetic, full of new voices that had once been overlooked. She smiled. "Let's build something that lasts," she said. Later that afternoon, she received an email from a young woman named Amira Jones, one of the company's interns. It read, "Miss Monroe, I just wanted to say thank you for how you carry yourself. Watching you handle everything with so much strength made me realize that being calm doesn't mean being weak. I hope one day I can be even half as composed as you were." Rachel sat quietly for a moment after reading it, a faint smile touching her lips. That was it. That was the reason she'd endured everything she did. Not for recognition, not for revenge, but so that someone else could see it was possible to walk through fire and come out cleaner, not burned. That evening, she returned to Radnor Lake, the same place she'd gone a few nights earlier. The water glistened again under the fading sun. She stood there, feeling the wind against her skin, the kind that carried both endings and beginnings. She thought about the word revenge, how tempting it could be, how easy it was to imagine her story as one of payback. But that wasn't what this was about. Rachel had chosen something harder: restraint, dignity, strength in silence. Because the truth was, revenge only satisfies for a moment. Dignity lasts forever. She whispered softly, as if speaking to her younger self, "You don't have to fight to prove you're strong. Sometimes walking away is the loudest thing you can do." As she walked back to her car, the air felt different, lighter, cleaner. Her phone buzzed with new notifications, but she didn't check them. For once, the world could wait. At the same time, back in the Whitaker household, Howard was reading the morning newspaper. The headline about Rachel stared him in the face. He sighed, then said quietly, "She did it right." Linda, sitting across from him, nodded. She did what none of us had the courage to do. Jordan, standing by the doorway, heard every word. He didn't say anything. He just turned and walked away. Not out of anger this time, but humility. The kind that comes when you finally see yourself clearly. The story wasn't one of triumph over enemies or corporate power. It was something deeper. A woman reclaiming her worth, not through shouting or revenge, but through quiet conviction. Because real strength isn't about proving people wrong. It's about never letting them convince you that you were wrong for being who you are. Rachel's voice echoed in her head as she drove home that night, steady, sure, complete. She had built her own peace, her own legacy, and her own name. And for the first time in her life, that was more than enough. Never let anyone make you feel small in spaces you helped build. When people try to take your worth, don't waste your energy fighting for their approval. Walk in your truth. Respect yourself enough to leave the table where love, honor, and equality are no longer served. Because dignity isn't loud, it's steady. It doesn't shout. It simply stands, and the world learns to listen.